The previous basket is under review.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the Basket Under Review podcast. I'm your host, Eamon Brennan, a buzzer at eamonbrennan.com. That's my newsletter. Go check it out. Also, Basket Under Review, the home of this show and the best and coolest new college basketball website on the internet. I'm back again today with Tate. We've got a great show for you. We're here in the beating heart of Feast Week, coming to you actually right after a very good Syracuse-Houston game. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about things we saw over the weekend, the early portions of Feast Week, kind of a bubbly, ostensibly bubbly section of Feast Week that was kind of fun. If you're into teams ranked, anywhere between 40th and 60th and KenPom at this stage of the season. We're also going to talk about the Players era, which, is on my second screen right now, and which I think, have some complicated feelings about. The games are great, but is the event great? And then we'll preview the rest of Feast Week for all of its strengths and its foibles and some of the funnier events that I think are cracking me up. So we'll get to all that first really quickly. As ever, I want to encourage you to go to basketunderreview.com, sign up for $10 a month. You support this show. You get access to the Trilly Donovan Discord, where he breaks news and where there's thousands of subscribers and hoop sickos in there at all hours of the day, just chatting away. You also get access to all the written content on the site, which is fantastic and voluminous and super in-depth. So check out basketunderreview.com, go sign up, support us and all the stuff we're doing over there. Also, another way to support this show, check out our presenting sponsor, Homefield, homefieldapparel.com, the best place in the world to get college athletics apparel, college basketball gear. We're very proud to have Homefield supporting us as ever. Go to homefieldapparel.com, buy like a cool corduroy hat with like a 1970s retro logo on it. Tell them we sent you, and you can support us that way. And thank you to Homefield for continuing to support our program. Okay, Tate, that's the intro done. We're in it now again, back for another week, back in the middle of Feast Week. First of all, how was your week? How was the weekend? How are you feeling in all things personal and college basketball related these days?
I'm feeling great. I love Feast Week. It's the best time of the year. I do feel like college basketball fans, we all kind of come together right now. Even the casual fans, we kind of welcome them in, give them a hug and say, welcome to the best time of the year. And it has changed a little bit. I feel like some people that are the casual fans are still trying to get up to speed on to kind of where we are in college basketball, but it's a great time. It's the best of times. And boy, do we have some great storylines. I mean, starting from Arizona, UConn last Wednesday all the way up into today, we have a lot to get to, a lot of big headlines, a lot of big headliners, and a lot of great performances. And even, a Miles Colvin shot for Wake Forest that I feel like was the best buzzer beater of the weekend. So a lot to get to.
Maybe the best buzzer beater of the season thus far,
right.
Although I'm probably forgetting a couple of highlights I've seen scrolling past me at various points. But yeah, I mean, even last week, I mentioned talking about the weekend, but we had a night of Arizona, UConn, followed by Illinois, Alabama, two of the better non-conference games you're ever going to see. And that Illinois, Alabama game, I mean, Arizona, UConn was high level, really good defense, solidly played on both sides, a huge win for Arizona, obviously. And then you flip over and watch Illinois and Alabama, and it's just like modern college basketball, just like threes. Like it was just an unbelievable night of hoops, and it's carried over, into the weekend. I kind of mentioned we had Purdue, Texas Tech, which in theory was a great game. In the run up, it didn't play out that way because Purdue just monstered them for 40 minutes essentially, and kind of, Texas Tech missed a few open threes during that game, but by and large they were pushed into uncomfortable positions, and Purdue's game plan was fantastic. And then on the offensive end, they were just unstoppable. So some interesting takeaways maybe for Texas Tech there. But you go back down through the weekend and some of the stuff we talked about last week, I feel like we kind of owe an apology to Butler, because we were talking about the Big East strength last week, or lack thereof, and kind of the rough start they've had to the season. But, Butler beats Virginia on Sunday, comes out in the Greenbrier Classic as the champions, managed to avoid hitting the ceiling with any of their effective shots in the Greenbrier ballroom, which was very low. If people didn't see, that's the joke. The ceiling was like, too low for a basketball arena, but you get that at resort MTEs sometimes. But a big win for Butler against the Virginia team that I, came away pretty impressed with from the weekend as well, and had a nice win over Northwestern. Northwestern's looking scrappy. Wake Forest, you mentioned the Colvin buzzer beater after they took their second absolutely brutal, they lost by what, a point or two to
two of the
Texas
best losses
Tech.
in the country, right? Michigan and Texas Tech. They were right there.
They've got two absolute bubble heartbreakers which for Wake Forest is especially cruel considering how badly they need to get into the tournament this year, or, given their recent history of just narrowly missing a few times in the past 3 years. So yeah, it was a great weekend. I would say maybe the team that I came away with kind of most impressed or encouraged by, even though they lost, was Cincinnati. I don't know if you watched the Cincinnati-Louisville game, but that was one where Cincinnati was in that game the entire time. I have not seen any, and Louisville's played a couple good teams already. I haven't seen anyone get anywhere close to defending Louisville at that level. And I think that might be the best offensive team in the country. So the fact that Cincinnati put that, performance together, ended up coming up a little short in the offensive end, that may be a recurring theme for them. But defensively, they're looking like, even after losing Mitchell to St. John's, they're looking like they're about as good as they were last year. And if you can build on things a little bit, then that maybe puts you back in the tournament conversation.
Yeah, probably lost the two most notable guys on the team, Jizzle James from last season, and then obviously Dylan Mitchell going to St. John's. So those are the two guys that would be point men, I guess, for the Cincinnati casual fan. My favorite text of the year is what I get when that game tips off. I get someone that texts me just in all caps, Kerr Kriisa, he's back, you know what I mean?
Yep.
He's here. He's everywhere. Kerr Kriisa's had quite the career. He's bounced all over the place. You last saw him at Kentucky. Yes, he's at Cincinnati. And you're right, in that game, the physicality of Cincinnati defensively really stood out at the point of attack. They were just getting in to those guards for Louisville. You could see that they were a little bit frustrated early on. Mikael Brown Jr. did eventually kind of settle into that game, ended up having a pretty good game there for Louisville. It was on both sides. I think the impressive part for Cincinnati defensively is how they hung in that game. But then also, I came away impressed with Louisville because they really got tested. Their mettle got tested in that game, and the fact that they were able to bounce back, show some poise, show some maturation throughout that game. I think both sides, we have winners and losers, obviously, but I came away impressed with both sides for different reasons.
Yeah, it's one of those games for us. We still need to come up with that category. But
Syracuse and Houston's probably in that category, right? Both teams.
Yes, and we will get to that for sure. We're hot off Syracuse, Houston, and we have thoughts on Syracuse especially. I'd say, but on Kerr Kriisa quickly, he's a real, he has been around forever, and that's the first thing I think maybe a lot of people think about him. His first season started in 2020, and we're here in deep into 2025, and he's still going. And I didn't really get it when Kentucky picked him up last year. I think he got paid a fair chunk to play at West Virginia the season before. He shot the ball well there. He didn't shoot it that well at Kentucky, but he only played 9 games because of injury. And, it didn't make a ton of sense to me given the roster that they had last year. And I don't think he ended up being like a huge miss for them, right? He's a player I have mixed feelings on. But on this Cincinnati team, when you look at their backcourt, losing James, but also just even if James had been there, say what you want about Kerr Kriisa, he's going to shoot the ball, and he's going to shoot it confidently and with range. And I think Cincinnati needs that like disproportionately relative to a lot of teams. They just need a guy who's going to take some 23, 24 footers, and they're not falling. He's 9 of 34 this year from 3. But I don't think that's what he is as a shooter. He's career like 36, 37%. So that number should come up, and they need that. They need a guy who can stretch the floor somewhat, because they're guys who can stretch the floor, with the exception of Tate is, they're like, it's like Baba Miller and even Tiam who likes an 18-footer, sometimes ill-advised, but they don't have a lot of other stretch guys on the offensive side, and that partially is what makes them so good defensively. They're all about physicality, rebounding, all that good stuff, and it's what kept them in the game against Louisville. But I think Kriisa is kind of like a smart addition for him, and initially he was supposed to be coming off the bench, and now he's going to be probably playing bigger minutes than was planned, and it may not be the worst thing for their sort of offense-defense balance.
And they showed some depth in that game. Sincere Harris coming off the bench had, I think it was 19 minutes, had 9 points, which was a nice kind of addition for them to show they have a little bit of depth. Baba Miller, I thought, had a really good game. Their front court played well in that game. So again, I mean, early on, Cincinnati had control of that game. I know the final score, they ended up losing by 10. So maybe if you're just box score watching, you say, well, they lost by 10. What's the real big takeaway here? But I think in general, it's an encouraging sign for Cincinnati and for Wes Miller. And this is a team that's going to have toughness just because of who Wes is. That is, I mean, if you've ever talked to Wes, I mean, he is all basketball, everything. I've compared him to Tibbs because he's kind of married to the game. Like, he only cares about college basketball. He's so locked in. And I think, if you're a fan of that team, it does have a little tinge of Mick Cronin era to it, with that toughness and that tenacity. So again, it's encouraging signs. Louisville sitting at 5-0, number 6 in the country. They're going to be who we thought they were. So that's also good news for them. But again, Cincinnati, the Big 12 is going to be a gauntlet, but they're going to be a team that's going to be in the mix. And like you said, we're kind of like the battle of the mid, and it's not the mid that they're bad teams, it's the battle of the middle. It's like all these teams from the 40 to the 70 range that are all trying to jockey for position, show, flashes and signs of who they can be, the best versions of themselves. We also see their weaknesses at times, and I think, in this game in particular, you could just kind of see the war of attrition wear down on Cincinnati as Louisville's firepower, especially with, Conwell. I think he ended up with 25 points in that game.
Yeah, he took that game over.
Yeah, he did. So, I mean, that's something that's going to be cause for concern. But again, a good lesson, and you're all just trying, every one of these teams right now in November is just fact-finding to see what buttons to push and who kind of, is the identity of their team and who they can rely on in these crunch and crucial situations. So Cincinnati learned, kind of how long they can stay in a game with a top flight team, but it's also encouraging to say that they can stay in a game with a top flight team.
Yeah. Another one of those games, sort of fact finding that you mentioned, was Nebraska, Kansas State, which I felt like was a really nice win for Nebraska, a good performance from Kansas State. You kind of see the offseason vision with Kansas State now, where it's Haggerty on the ball a ton, as he was always going to be. I mean, his usage rate in the Nebraska game was up around the mid 30s. So I mean, that's big, but it's not surprising because that's kind of what he did at Memphis last year in many ways. Just always is going to have the ball and is going to initiate everything. And you put guys around him who can knock some shots down and get at the rim and move away from, move in space and away from the ball. And it makes sense. And Nebraska, I think, has become the case under Fred Hoiberg, running really efficient offensive stuff. They run good stuff. They have for several years now, ever since he kind of dragged them out from under the first few years of his tenure where they were just playing bad. They are looking like a real deal offensive team again this year. And we're going to see, I think, how this result kind of holds up and what it means context wise for both teams, because Kansas State goes to Indiana actually tonight, as you're hearing this, Tuesday night. And so we'll get to see them in a real non-conference environment, true road game against a team that has started super hot and that will present a lot of challenges, and that will, give us some transitive property thoughts maybe about Nebraska and where they stand too. But, Nebraska came out of the past week with wins over Oklahoma, New Mexico, and K-State, and that's pretty good going as far as, a team that I think probably most people had bottom half of the Big Ten coming in. They and Northwestern are looking pretty sturdy, and I think the Big Ten is looking pretty solid all around right now too.
Yeah, they got some depth. Price Sanford was good in that game. A nice addition coming from the Iowa ranks, to get over there. We obviously know his brother very well. And then Sam Hoiberg. How about Sam Hoiberg looking pretty good? I love a father-son combo. Obviously, we get that with Shrewsbury, with Notre Dame. So I like seeing that for Nebraska as well. And Kansas State, to me, is kind of like we joke about, like, the league pass teams in the NBA. And, Bill Simmons always does, like, his favorite league pass teams. I feel like Kansas State might be the best league pass team in college basketball right now. They're just fun to watch because of Haggerty, because of Bashir, who's such a great shooter. Obviously, moved up a level and has showed, good signs so far as for that to be able to translate. That's not always the case. Trace and Eaglestaff would probably be the perfect example of that, not translating right now this year. But we have one of those guys every single year. But this team in general, Kansas State, they are fun to watch. They have a star player. I think that this was a really good game that a lot of people maybe missed on a Friday night. So, Kansas State, encouraging signs there. Nebraska, nice to win a gritty game. And, at 6-0 with those types of wins, maybe they get some consideration from the AP poll. And, if Hoiberg could get Nebraska back ranked, that would be great for the Big Ten, just another like feather in their cap basically at this point.
Yeah, no. And if you like watching guys who are actual, people say this term a lot, but PJ Haggerty is actually like a 3-level scorer. Mm-hmm. If anything, he's at his worst kind of around the rim, but he's still pretty effective there. But threes, mid-range, he's really crafty. He's fun to watch in that kind of old school nostalgic way. Where you're not super over optimized, but still really efficient. I love guys like that who
the ultimate Kimba candidates. Yeah,
exactly. Their mid range is still an efficient shot. I really like players like that, even if they, understand you need to get to the rim, you need to take threes and optimize somewhat. love guys who can operate in the middle of the floor. The Bruce Thorntons of the world
Mm-hmm.
are highly enjoyable to me. Okay, well, those are kind of the highlights from over the week. I do want to focus on like I said, the heart of feast, which we're in right now. And before we get to the games that we watched throughout Monday here, and we're going to talk about Kansas Notre Dame too, because I'm mad at Notre Dame. I suggested to my friends that was a good bet, and they missed literally every wide open three they had all game. Very frustrating for my
a lot of fight though,
my reputation.
The ACC is getting a lot of moral victories early on in the season.
Yeah, they sure are. There were two today. Although maybe my frustration is clouding with Notre Dame a little bit, but it's just like, oh God, I should not have suggested this. It was mostly about me not having a lot of faith in Kansas, but they guarded really well. Anyway, we'll get to that in a minute. First, I want to talk about the players' era in general. I think that's been the big topic of conversation if we're talking about, sort of big thematic things in college basketball over the last week or so, is people coming to terms with this new event. And it's expanded from last year to this year. It's going to be expanded massively next year to 32 teams. They're talking about stretching it out over 3 weeks, figuring out the scheduling so that if you don't make the third round, you maybe can get another game. You still get paid out in full, or however it works. It's a big change to the feast week calendar, to the November calendar, starting next year, and is kind of, in a way, I have complicated feelings about it, right? Because we've been talking on this podcast, particularly for the last couple of weeks, about how good all these games are and how exciting it is that all these teams are playing each other so early in the year, and the season starts earlier. So it's not just the Champions Classic where people pay attention anymore. There's just stuff happening all the time. And, as much as I think most like real diehard college basketball fans love to keep an eye on the mid-major games and can find something entertaining in any slate on any night, the big marquee things are exciting early in the year, and you want to see these teams and find out how good, the Houstons of the world really are, the Kansas of all that stuff. And so there's a part of me that's sitting here watching these games, and I've got Auburn, Oregon on right now, another really good game that I'm excited to watch. And there's also a part of me that's a little sad about all this, because, and we can get to the format of the competition in a little bit, because that's another major gripe that I have. But it's a weird deal where, on the one hand, it's good. Kids are getting paid. There's more NIL money in the pot. That money goes to players. It helps the coaches and programs participating sign better players. And you can understand why an event like the Maui Invitational or the Battle for Atlantis and some of these other sort of classic tentpole MTEs would have a hard time replicating that model, given the capital that apparently seems to have been infused into this players era event. So I get why people are participating in it, and I like the games. On the other hand, I'm just kind of sad because you look at this year's Maui Invitational field, and it's fine, it's solid, but you have to go back a pretty long way to find a Maui Invitational field with this few sort of national title contenders in it. And so that's the part that bums me out a little bit, is because that feels, and I don't think it's just an age thing. I don't think it's just a nostalgia thing. I think it's an environment thing and a culture thing. It feels to me a little bit like conference realignment, where you understand the reasons why it's happening, and you can make the argument for it, and fans can make the argument for it. Like, well, we got to do this. We're Washington, we're Oregon. We got to be in the Big Ten. That's where all the money is. And you step back from it from a higher level as a neutral observer, just someone who kind of loves the whole college sports thing, and you lose the regional rivalries, and now we're losing some of the luster of a tight packed gym in Maui, giving you the best atmosphere of any college basketball you're going to see basically before March, with the exception of actual home and road games on campuses. So I'm rambling, but I'm conflicted, and I'm wondering where you're at with all this.
I'm conflicted as well. And like you said, it's about atmosphere. And I feel like a lot of these decisions that have been made without the understanding of college basketball, right? And what makes it so great. And I think even the understanding of like why these events tickle our fancy so much, like seeing the Lahaina Civic Center packed out, a high school gym where, Jay Billis was talking about during the games today. He's like, remember when they didn't have AC a few years ago and guys were cramping, right? Like there was all these, just factors. We love the soft rims and Maui's, right? There's all these like touch points that we all have as we watch these games. And then when the Battle for Atlantis really got their juice going, it was an existential crisis, but at least the alternative was also kind of similar in the way that it was built in a ballroom. You look at the Greenbrier event, like you said, it's in a ballroom. It has this cachet, it has this weird mystique, this weird magic. Just kind of these things that you want as a college basketball fans. Also, like the fans are there in the building when it's in this huge arena that's an NBA arena and there's nobody in the seats and it feels hollow and it feels soulless. We all kind of sit there and say, wow, this is a great matchup between St. John's and Iowa State, for example. Boy, would this have been great in Maui, you know? And traditionally, that probably would have been a game that we see in the Maui Invitational, or even like a Rutgers Tennessee was the first game of the day. And at halftime, they get back to Jamal Mashburn, and the Monster Mash is up there, and he's like, "Where are these Tennessee fans at?" Right? They're like calling out the fans as to like where they are. Like they're putting the blame on the fans for not being in attendance. But if you look at ticket prices for this event, this is not for the common man. This is obviously an elevated event that is expensive to get into. Also, there's empty seats all over the place. So there just has to be some sort of middle ground. And I think like it feels like an NBA-ification of college basketball where it's like we're in these games that somehow feel meaningless, but in the college basketball lens and landscape, they're huge games that need and deserve the atmospheres that we want. Like watching Arizona in Gamble is awesome. Like that's why we love the game, right? To see the home court advantage, to see the fans going crazy, to see the students involved. It feels like we're slowly just moving the teams away from their college experience and we're putting them in pro experiences. Yes, they are basically pros at this point, but the further we get away from the experience of being a college basketball player on a college basketball team, it just feels a little icky. And the Maui experience, like even when I was in Maui, we would talk to some of the players and the coaches and stuff. Like, yes, the basketball was important. Yes, it was awesome to play in the Lahaina Civic Center, but just like the communal time together as a team, riding on the bus back to the hotel, going snorkeling together, getting on the catamaran with Jay Billis and Dan Shulman, like some of this stuff, you know what I mean? Like, yes, it sounds a little bit hokey and maybe you can roll your eyes to it, but I do think it is important to college basketball. And I think it does kind of create this stage and this pageantry that we all love. And when you take that stuff away and you strip it down and you're just like, hey, you know why we're here? We're here for the $2 million. Also, what do we also love in college basketball? Brackets. Like we're also going to take brackets away where it doesn't really have a real sense as to how we get to the champion and all this sort of stuff. I mean, it just feels so far removed from what kind of Feast Week in college basketball is all about that I think it's understandable to feel this type of way. And again, it's no knock on the Players Era Festival. They're trying their best to put on an event. They've been, obviously like trying their best to promote it and obviously getting a lot of big level and high level matchups in this event. So, I mean, it's no knock on the actual matchups themselves. It's more just about the experience. And when we look back, we're like, these games kind of blur together in this, empty arena. And I'm sure tonight it'll get more packed for Gonzaga, Alabama. It's understandable that, at 10 o'clock Pacific time, it's not going to be packed for Rutgers, Tennessee. But it just feels a little bit different. And I'm worried that if we continue to expand the Players Era Festival, we're going to have an NCAA tournament in November. You know what I mean? We're going to have 64 teams playing in the Players Era Festival. And I'm not sure that's a world we all want to live in. And I hope at some point, all the smarter minds get together and they figure out a way to, to preserve some of this stuff because we need Maui to exist. We need Battle for Atlantis to exist. We need Fort Myers to exist, right? All these tournaments have their own kind of cachet. Charleston, Greenbrier. I mean, like you can run through the gamut of all these events and like they all have a special quality to them. And I think for college basketball's sake, we need the quirkiness, we need the strangeness, the oddness, whatever you want to call it, because it matters for the whole pie of the season, and it also gives you great experiences for all these players.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's of a piece with the larger drift in college athletics that, again, exists in tension with what we're talking about in terms of the quality of the games and wanting to see really good games, because the product on the court has never been better. At the same time, and as much as I'm enjoying the season and as much as I've been raving about it every week on this podcast, the long-term trend of college sports for the last 10, 20 years, and especially I think has been turbocharged in the last 5 or 6. And I'm not just talking about NIL. I am very pro NIL. Like I've repeatedly written about how it's a good thing and immediate transfers are a good thing. Let players have the same financial and sort of career flexibility as coaches. It's a no-brainer to me. What I'm talking about, though, is sort of the gradual drift away from what most college sports fans would understand as the stuff that they kind of immediately identify with college sports. And it's a little bit bewildering now. The conferences are way different and strange and don't make any sort of regional cultural sense. They are entirely composed based on market share analytics and the best possible way to generate the most revenue from a TV rights deal. That's why conferences exist at this point. So that's one thing. And the conference realignment thing, I think, has been, however much more money it's made and however, I'm sure ratings and everything for college football this season are holding the line or doing well or whatever. But I do think there's just something lost that I think if you're taking a really long-term view of college athletics and what people like about it, and college basketball has been super guilty of this as well. If you're a random person and you don't know what to watch, you just really like sports and you think, I'm going to throw on a college basketball game in November. You want to see it at a campus. That's a big part of the draw for you. And college basketball has been guilty of this for ages now, of taking the short-term best option, whether it's more advantageous scheduling for your team or it's more money playing in, Cowboys Stadium as opposed to in Waco or whatever, just to use an example, or whatever the case may be, has drifted away from conference games on campuses. That's another thing that I think people identify with as sort of intrinsically part of the draw of college basketball. And you lose more and more of that. And I think the Players era today, just watching it, for as good as the games have been, and shout out to Iowa State fans, I think they're the only fan base that really gave any of those games like some pop and juice in the arena.
Creighton tried. Creighton and Iowa State
tried.
were the two that I feel like showed out. So we'll give them some love for showing up.
Yeah, I'll tell you, as someone who grew up in Iowa, if you give people from Iowa or Eastern Nebraska a reason to go to Las Vegas in November, they'll take you up on it. They don't need much of an excuse. It's direct flights from Des Moines and the Quad Cities all over the place. But otherwise, like, again, we just watched a great Houston Syracuse game. The atmosphere was not very good in the arena, and in Maui, it would have been massive. It would have been the walls would have been shaking, and so it's just. You wonder how far this sort of stuff can go, where your long-term health, overall organic health of the sport and the entertainment value of the sport can still sustain. You know what I mean? Where you're not actively in a constant series of short one-by-one decisions, finding yourself at a place where someone who wants to check in back on college basketball this season is suddenly completely alienated and doesn't understand why these games are where they are and what they are. And I think we've gotten there slowly, and the Players era has sort of been the thing, in part because it seems to be a direct threat to the Maui Invitational's quality and the field that's going to have in the future. It feels like a little bit of a watershed moment in, like, okay, we understand the reasons you're doing this. We understand why Oregon and Washington has to be in the big, and UCLA and USC have to be in the Big Ten. But at what point do you go so far that the stuff that makes college sports and makes it entertaining, makes it a good product, let alone just like amateurism, like whatever, a good product to watch? How much of that culture can you lose before you actively harm the sort of 10, 20, 30-year horizon of the entire enterprise?
It does feel like Play-Doh. Like you're just pulling it far and stretching it as far as you can, and eventually just going to snap. You know what I mean? And we're stretched very thin right now. And I feel like what is the current setup is about as far as you can be stretched with everyone kind of being okay with it. The Maui field has been a big talking point. I do feel like Maui at some point has to figure out, how do you incentivize people to want to come to Maui? Is it getting a sponsor that's going to, donate, $1 million and make that the prize money? And it's like brought to you by American Airlines. And then, the winning team is like doing American Airlines ads for the rest of the season. I don't know what it looks like, but obviously the travel, you pay for all that. I mean, Maui was supposed to be the experience. You're paid in exposure, which is not the right way for it to really work, right, in today's world. Like you said, I agree with you. It was not.
And coaches are making the business decisions too, because Maui is not going to pay them out the way this event is going to, and this event's payout is another high level starter. if it's $2 million or whatever, that's a guy that can help
It's
you
PJ
win 5 more
Haggerty.
games next year. Exactly. That's a guy that can help you win 5, maybe 10 more games the following season. So it's kind of a no-brainer for them. And you don't have to travel all the way to Maui and all of that good stuff. So, we remember Dan Hurley last year, and obviously he was upset. He was not in a good place, but he talked about it like, I'm never coming here again. Like, because that side of it, as fun as the event is, it does introduce some logistical challenges for coaches too. So you can completely understand why they take a look at this and are just like, oh yeah, duh, we're doing that.
And Will Wade might use that same excuse, after the loss to Seton Hall. We'll see what happens. But I do think from a television product standpoint, like if I'm the TV executives and I'm watching the Players Era Festival, I'm saying to myself, I would much rather be putting on the Maui Invitational. You know what I mean? As far as Jay Billis, Dan Shulman on the call in the Lahaina Civic Center, like the pageantry of that scene on television is so much better than the product that we're seeing in the Players Era Festival. And maybe someone high up will make that discernible point, and they'll make a pivot to where some of these games in the Players Festival, like the first round, second round, are on campus, and then we go to Vegas for the third round or the championship round, right? There's got to be some way to mitigate the difference between the Maui, the Battle for Atlantis, some of these other MTEs, or maybe you get them involved in the process where they're all kind of like a product of the Players Era Festival. Like Fort Myers is a part of the Players Era Festival that feeds into the championship in Vegas, right? There's got to be some better way where it all kind of feeds itself, as opposed to, the hungry hippo model we have right now at the Players Era Festival, which is just eating up every good team. And
right.
That's just not fair, not fun for anybody. And we just want to watch high-level games in great environments. It's really that simple. And I do feel like there has to be a common sense approach. But as I have heard from my grandpa growing up a lot, common sense ain't common. So, this kind of feels like that type of situation.
Yeah, that's some good folksy wisdom from Grandpa there. It holds true. Speaking of which, on the topic, we should talk about the format of the Players Era, because I've been trying to wrap my head around it for the last couple days here. So I'm just going to read this. Basket Under Review's Rocco Miller helpfully tweeted this out earlier today. Will Warren tweeted one out, but it turned out to be a complete fabrication that he made up and involved like Red Panda deciding the tiebreaker after like 7 rounds of tiebreaking. But this is the actual like how the format of the tournament works. After day 2, all 18 teams will be ranked 1 through 18 based on the following criteria: 1, record; 2, head-to-head; 3, plus-minus tiebreaker, maximum of 20 points; 4, total points scored; 5, total points allowed; 6, AP ranking as of 11/24. As innovative as the Players Era event is in its sheer existence, there are many proven ways of deciding who plays in the next round of a competition that involve none of this. And this is the number one thing. And there was a quote, actually, Matt Norlander of CBSSports.com wrote a big, long sort of behind the scenes history of how this event came along. And it's really helpful to understand sort of the money behind it and the people behind it and the well-intentioned people behind it. This is not some nefarious thing that's, just been launched by a shadowy cabal. It's people who really care about basketball, who have kids who play college basketball, who coach at the high school level. Like there's good intentions here. But the one thing that you get in Matt's story is they've done a good job running it. The money gets paid out on time. Everybody got paid last December right on time, and there were some worries about that going in. It's all been very above board, very professional and buttoned up. But one quote in the story was, "It's a first-class event. Great communication from the organizers with clear expectations all around," one Big 12 source said. And by the way, the Big 12 has signed a deal.
I was like, that might be a compromise point there.
Yeah. The Big 12 has signed a deal. I think it got announced Monday that they're going to have like a set number of teams. I think like their top 6 in the previous conference standings are going to automatically go to the Players Era Festival in future seasons. So take that for what it's worth. There's a business relationship here, but they have had to be innovative with the implementation of NIL Go, which is the new NIL portal, but they're doing everything possible to make it legitimate. They need to make some improvements to the tournament format with the way it's bracketed, but I'm confident those will be implemented soon. I sure hope so, because do a round robin, do whatever you want. there's plenty of other ways to break this down, but this like arcane, incredibly confusing series of tiebreakers where like points scored and margin of victory are really important. So you see Tennessee like running it up on Rutgers late in the game. This is not like the best way to format a non-conference November competition. We can do a bit better here.
And it's leading itself to a committee being formed, and it's going to be
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
need.
It's going to turn into like a CFP situation where we're going to have people litigating like, well, who's involved with this committee? What are their biases that are, behind their decisions, right? I mean, that to me feels like, just based on how it's currently set up, we're going to get to that point where they're like, hey, we talked to Brett Yormark and, the Big 12, and we've decided to make him the head of this committee, the Players Era committee, and we're going to figure out who the best teams are, and that's going to be the decision. And then
Players Era bubble watch.
Yeah, exactly. And then we're going to have, 4 Big 12 teams and 2 SEC teams, and you're going to have ACC and Big 10. You know what I mean? They're going to be litigating the process. So I just feel like the more you can make it an actual bracket where the basketball and the actual results of the game dictate what happens on the court, the better. The more you bring in points allowed and all this sort of other stuff, then you get into the weeds. And I know with the net, margin of victory already matters at some level. So that is already a factor for some of these teams, which some people are arguing that's why Tennessee did what they did against Rutgers. It was all about the net or whatever. But I don't think that's the case. I think that they were doing it for the event.
I think they want the best game. Yeah, I think they want the best game possible later in the week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very strange.
Yeah, it's an odd format, and with 32 teams next year, maybe there's got to be a better way to figure it out. And I'm sure they're kind of trying to juggle the fact that these teams want good games, so they want to show up. The part of the appeal also is you're going to get 2. These are the 2 games you get, the first 2 days of the event, and it's of a certain quality, right? That is one thing, again, about Maui, is because of the bracket format, you may end up getting, if you're Arizona State or Texas and Chaminade somehow beats Washington State, all of a sudden you're getting a game against Chaminade, and that doesn't help you in any way, shape, or form come the second week of March and Selection Sunday. So you understand that too, but yeah, there's got to be a better way. And again, for the viewer, for the fan, for the sort of entertainment product, it is just nice knowing, okay, Seton Hall beat NC State, so Seton Hall plays USC, and then the winner of that game could play yada yada. It's just
and win a championship. That feels like a valid championship.
Sure. Yeah, and we've sort of, there have been numerous past examples of teams that win the Maui, and it's like, yeah, the last time this team won the Maui, they won the national championship, like UConn, and famously
Roy Williams, UNC, that was the model, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting. It's, and again, it exists in tension with the fact that these are good basketball games that I'm excited to have more of in November, and it's not as hit and miss maybe as some of the other events can be. And that is the complicating factor of college athletics right now, is like, I criticized and railed as hard as probably anybody during all the conference realignment stuff, a couple years ago when the Pac-12 was getting torn apart and spread to the wind. And has it stopped me watching Big Ten football this year? No. Does that have something to do with the fact that Indiana is suddenly like the greatest football program in the history of college football? Maybe. But also, it hasn't dimmed or as far as I can tell, any of my friends' enthusiasm for watching college football on a Saturday, or certainly watching any of these college basketball games. I'm not turned off enough, and maybe that's just how it goes. And maybe in 5 years, the Players Era has big crowds, and in 15 years, we're nostalgic for the Players Era Fest. Like, who knows? But it is a weird period of transition that, again, exists in tension with the fact that we saw some really good games today. Let's just get into Houston, Syracuse.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because I come away very positive on Syracuse, very happy for them. For anyone who saw this game, Syracuse had a great first half, played well, looked really tough, right with Houston on the physical side the entire game, got down 11 late, and it looked like, okay, Houston's just going to, salt this away the way Houston does. A little dicey at points, but then they lock in on defense, get a couple offensive rebounds, hit a couple threes, and that's Houston. Good night. Syracuse comes back, 11-0 run late to tie the game, go to overtime, and again, looking ahead, very positive for Syracuse, extremely positive performance. But I can't help but be, just on Syracuse fans' behalf, slightly frustrated by a couple things. One, they made 0 free throws. I mean, that's not completely accurate, but they
Felt like it.
I have the exact number. 1 second here. They were 12 of 29 from the free throw line. Okay, in a game that they lost in overtime by 4 points. Let's keep that in mind. The other part was, even with all this ongoing free throw woes, and Syracuse is a bad free throw shooting team. They came in ranked like 352nd. They're shooting like 62% from the free throw line. Not 41% like they shot tonight. Maybe 60% gets you a win most nights. But the other bit is, in overtime, I do not understand why Syracuse fouled Uzan 45 feet from the basket with his back turned with 16 seconds left after getting the 2-for-1 quickly to get the lead down to 2. There's 34 seconds on the clock when Syracuse scored. So Houston's got to come down and put a shot up if you don't foul them. And it didn't look like the bench called for a foul. And so maybe it was just Nathan George just had a moment of a brain neutral moment. But that essentially ended the game, because Uzan goes and hits two free throws. There's 16 seconds left. Unless you do something crazy, which didn't play out, the game's over. So I'm simultaneously quite positive, and I'm sure most Syracuse fans will walk away being like, hey, we got a team. Like, this is a real team. We're gonna do some stuff this year. But also kind of frustrated, because if you make literally a few more free throws, or maybe manage the game better down the stretch in overtime, you're coming out with a win over the number 1 team in the country. And that's going to maybe hurt later in the year if they tread water. If they go on and play like this every night, we're going to look back, it's not going to matter. But if this was like a peak moment and you don't get that win that you can carry through an ACC season, depending on its ups and downs, it's going to be a frustrating thing to look back on in some ways.
Yeah, this would have been a great win for Syracuse. Obviously, it would have been the first time they had a top 5 win since 2019, so pre-pandemic. So even Kirk Kriisa wasn't in college yet, to put it in context. So, I mean, that's how long it's been. So Syracuse really needed this game. Donnie Freeman does not play in this game. Their leading scorer, which is also another reason to feel encouraged if you're Syracuse. 6 players in double figures, including Kyan Anthony. Great to see Carmelo there courtside at the game. He was having some back and forth with Emmanuel Sharp in this game. Unfortunately, Sharp got the best of that battle. Uzan and Sharp are both great in this game. We talked about Houston last week, about late in the game, it feels like, Flemings is going to be kind of their go-to guy. But tonight, it was the veterans that really sealed the deal, especially Emmanuel Sharp late in this one, and then obviously Uzan at the free throw line. But Nathan George was good in this game. I really thought he was a good player. I liked him at Georgia Tech last year. He's a legit point guard, but he had 2 mental miscues. You mentioned one of them, which was the foul when the shot clock's going down. You got Uzan 30 feet from the basket, and Red Autry looked just as frustrated as you and I were as we watched that live. So obviously,
there was some text going back and forth.
Yeah, there was also just that was not a from the bench decision. It just felt like he got a little handsy, and obviously, the whistle gets blown, and that kind of ends the game. But then also in regulation, they have the ball. Clock with about 21 seconds left, no shot clock. They run in the clock down for one last shot. He probably waited, and Candace Parker pointed this out, probably 2 seconds too late. Now, that's very minuscule. Obviously, it's a little bit nitpicky. These are things that are going to be learned from a mental capacity as you kind of move forward in the season. But he starts that play a little bit late. He gets the ball to William Kyle there in the paint. Tugler makes an incredible block. All ball. Ends the game there. But if he starts that, possession, that last possession a little bit earlier, maybe, he gets that block, ball comes back down, Kyle gets another attempt right at the rim. We're talking about Syracuse winning on a buzzer beater. You know what I mean? That's just how little of a difference this could have made in this game, not to mention the however many free throws they missed, 15 or whatever it was. It felt like they missed 100 if you watch this game live. So, I mean, again, that many players in double digits, your best player doesn't play in the game. You match Houston's physicality. I felt like there was a maturation in this game when they got down 11 where, like you said, it felt like it was over, but then Syracuse just never went away. They were just kind of a gnat buzzing around Kelvin Sampson and the rest of the Houston team's head the end of that game, and they really made a great run there, made some great defensive stops. They had a couple questionable calls, one with Uzan that they challenged late that looked like it was off his hand, at least in the live view. They said it was, inconclusive, so they don't turn that over. Also, you had a Uzan travel that turned into a foul in overtime that I thought was a little bit questionable. So again, if you're Syracuse, you're saying to yourself, man, we had it right there. There's so many little moments that it could have swung our way. But again, when the committee is evaluating this team, they're not going to be going, oh, man, remember when they almost beat Houston in the Players Era Festival? We're going to have so many games at that point that have washed over us that no one's going to be able to go back. And maybe someone brings up the point, when you talk about Syracuse, if they're on the bubble, which they look like a team that definitely will be in consideration for the NCAA tournament, especially once they get Freeman back. But this just felt like the one that got away. It was right there for the taking. They were staring down a signature win for Red Autry, and he's been looking for that signature win ever since he got the job from Boeheim, and this was the game to do it. So you feel for them in the moment, but if you're Houston, you just show that you can win a totally different way, because this time it happened to be the seniors who kind of got you through the smoke, and that is encouraging as well, that you've had the young guys do it, you've had the elder statesmen do it. Now both sides can figure it out down the stretch.
Yeah, and we talked in depth last week about some of Houston's sort of transitional challenges to this season. And the veterans hadn't played well, and they needed Flemings, to get by against Auburn the previous week. Obviously, that flipped on its head tonight. And, you're seeing some of the same challenges, I think, mostly on the interior. Like, I think when you have Flemings, Uzan, and Sharp as your starting guards, you're going to get production from them one way or the other. Someone's going to make shots, get to the rim. Things are going to happen. Good things are going to happen on the offensive end. Joseph Tugler is a slightly more concerning situation. I mean, you see his value with the block at the end. He had 5 blocks. He was, really good in the stuff that he kind of always does in terms of being super disruptive defensively, switching positions in the middle of the lane. It's really hard to score over the top of him. But he is struggling in this sort of reconfigured offensive role. And when Chris Sinak was pretty anonymous for most of basically like the first 30 minutes of the game, Houston essentially had no scoring on the interior other than offensive rebound putbacks. And even those were at a premium. I thought William Kyle for Syracuse looks like a real asset for them. Like, he's played, after transferring to UCLA from South Dakota State, he mostly rode the bench for them last year. Played a bit. Like, I think he played like 30% of available minutes, something like that. Nothing crazy. He wasn't a big piece for them. Coming into Syracuse, he's now a really important front court guy and has played well to start the season, but Syracuse hasn't played anybody good. And so seeing him stand up to the Houston front court, and Tugler specifically, I thought was really promising. But Houston's got a little bit of stuff to figure out. Yeah. Offensively, with like Sinak gives them skill and sort of technical level on the offensive end when he's playing well. But if he's not, and you're kind of trying to put Tugler in the J1 spots on the offensive end, catching the ball at the free throw line and trying to create from there, it's not, it doesn't look like it's
his range is about 3 feet from the basket right now.
Yeah,
Tugler. Like, I mean, he had a little floater late that should have been an easy finish, and it's just a clank. You know what I mean?
He shouldn't be,
right.
He shouldn't be away from the rim. Frankly, like, that's just not his game. You know what I mean? He needs to be
in the dunker spot, basically.
Yeah. And he's not there right now. And so it's a little awkward for Houston. But again, when you have guards as good as that, you're gonna be fine more often than not.
One other thing just on Kyle, I feel like he learned in this game how Houston was batting the ball out to get the offensive rebounding obviously is always a thing for Houston, but it was big in this game, getting them extra possessions. But then you saw Kyle start doing that from Syracuse. He had a couple late where, he was just kind of learning from Tugler in the moment, like timing these jumps and batting the ball back out and getting extra possession. So if you're Syracuse, you're like, he maybe picked up another skill just playing against Houston, seeing how they were able to create more possessions, and that could help them down the road in the ACC.
Yeah, and he held up well on the defensive end too. Had 7 defensive rebounds, finished with 12 and 10, had a few dunks off some like handoff fakes that got Houston a little discombobulated on the defensive end, which you don't see very often. A couple of those were on Sinak, which I think, Kelvin will have him like Clockwork Orange style with his eyeballs peeled back, staring at the film.
It's going to be a tough film session for the Houston Cougars, that's for sure.
I wouldn't want to be a part of it. Would like to watch it from a distance, would not want to be one of the subjects of the film.
I would like to see the key plays, like from YouTube TV.
It's not going to be a pleasant environment in that film session, knowing Kelvin as we do. But Houston survives. Interesting sort of woulda, coulda for Syracuse. But again, if they play like this, if this is if this performance is real and not just a one-off sort of random November game you should have won that everyone's going to forget about, if this is a real performance level for them, and for some of these guys, mistakes aside, then yeah, you're pretty, you're pretty thrilled as a Syracuse fan, given where they've been the last couple of seasons. So, not the worst thing in the world, despite the loss. I speaking of ACC teams that need a big win, Notre Dame earlier today against Kansas. Now, I may be extra harsh on Notre Dame here just because I made the mistake of telling my friends who are always looking for a college basketball or any other kind of sports wager about which I have no expertise. Hey, I kind of like Notre Dame in this. I don't think Kansas's offense is very good without Darren Peterson. I don't think they can create too much. I think Notre Dame is a better shooting team. They have the best guard on the floor. Yada yada. They're older. They need this win more than Kansas does. And I think the theory was sound. I think the homework, the package that I put together on this idea was pretty sound. And then you get into the game, and number one, they had no answer for Flory Badunga at all, which, hey, that's going to happen. You can see Badunga coming into his own as like a post player with touch, an interior finisher, and not just a guy who dunks alley-oops and gets offensive rebounds.
And a passer.
He's really rounding into like, okay, this guy's a good college basketball player who does a bunch of stuff pretty well or to really well. So Notre Dame had no answer for that. They also just missed everything. And it was a really frustrating game to watch because, I don't care about the bet side of it. I just like to be right and smug. and sitting there being like, if they had made, I would say there were probably 10 pretty open missed threes that,
4 for 24 from three in this game.
Yeah. I mean,
16%.
Some of those were well guarded, and Kansas is a good defensive team. Even without Peterson, I think they're solid defensively. They switched a ton of stuff, and it took Notre Dame until the second half to really get to terms with how physical they were, and all of that. Kansas had a big part to play, but there were a lot of missed shots, and seeing Kansas try to build a lead and get away from the game a little bit, and sort of spread things out a little bit, sort of margin wise. And kind of be unable to do it because they just offensively without Peterson are so limited. You got Melvin Council throwing the ball off the backboard and stuff half the time. I mean, he made one and then shot a couple more. Just like Melvin, one went in, but you got to take a break here. And Notre Dame just completely unable to capitalize. And so I think it's going to be frustrating for Notre Dame fans because it's a 40% 3-point shooting team coming in. They played well at Ohio State in a true road environment, didn't come away with the win there. And on another night, with a little bit more efficiency on the offensive end, they could have gotten a big win over a Kansas team that, again, I think has some serious flaws, but is going to be in the NCAA tournament this year.
Yeah, Jalen Harrelson is the encouraging sign. McDonald's All-American. I feel like Marcus Burton obviously is the star of this team. 24 points in this game. Obviously an elite scorer. We all know who Marcus Burton is at this point, but they need some help around him. And I feel like Harrelson is going to grow into that player. I thought Sir Muhammad gave them some good minutes in this game, coming off the bench, played about 13 minutes, had 4 points, 5 boards. So, I mean, Shrewsbury obviously is going to be out there. So they just need more of the other guys around Burton to help him facilitate a complete game. And I feel like that's the missing piece for Notre Dame because they have the star. They have a guy who's first team, second team, all ACC candidate. Some people think he could win Player of the Year in the ACC if things kind of bode their way. So, I mean, there's encouraging signs for Notre Dame. But then on the Kansas side, I felt like this was the first game where there was a passing of the torch to the front court. Like I was there for the Kansas-North Carolina game. We talked about that. It felt like the front court was the Achilles heel of the team. Badunga wasn't great. He was, head down when he catches the ball, not looking for guys. But Tiller's been a great cutter. Trey White's been a great cutter. And I feel like they figured out a little bit of this offense where it's like, okay, we initiate a pass in the post. We have our guys cut behind us, whether it's Tiller, whether it's Trey White. And Badunga has 5 assists in this game. He leads the team in assists. Council had 4. So from the Kansas side of things, it's like if Tiller and Badunga can have this connectivity together in the front court, they're a real dangerous team because that is a real dangerous front court as far as talent is concerned. Trey White's been a great X factor. And in reality, like Rosario had a terrible game. Council had an okay game. He was a little back and forth, up and down. But if they get Darren Peterson with that front court playing together in tandem, now you're talking about a real Kansas team, a team that when it comes around to March, you're like, man, that's going to be a bad matchup. They got a potential number 1 pick along with 2 real front court guys. That Tiller's a 5-star. Tiller's a really good player, and he's getting better. And I feel like he's learning how to find his spots on the court with Badunga. They're not taking up the same space. It felt like early in their season, it was like Tiller's on the 3-point line, but Dunga's clogging the paint. There's nowhere for him to go. But now they figured out how to like enter into the high post. Tiller's cutting on the backside. Trey White's cutting to the ball. You know what I mean? There's a lot of better movement and spacing between those three guys. And I feel like for Kansas, this was not the prettiest game, but I feel like if you're a fan of this group, you're like, hey, we got something with these front court guys. And if we keep encouraging Badunga and Tiller to play off one another, they got a recipe for success. When and if, and the big if Peterson comes back.
Right. Yeah. Putting Peterson in this mix, maybe, and it may end up being one of those things that's beneficial to play this part of the season without him and have to figure other stuff out. And you're right. The front court skill level is higher than it looked even a couple weeks ago. And I think Tiller has demonstrated that kind of, you can just see it, right? Like he's a technically really good player who can do lots of stuff with the ball and can step out and shoot it. And is just good with it in his hands. Badunga, I think you're right. Like tonight was a big step forward. And there were parts of that game where you're just like, why is Notre Dame not, as he goes over his right shoulder for the fourth time in a row down the floor or whatever, like, why is Notre Dame not running a guy? And they started doing it in the second half and had some success with it. But also got into those overplay scramble situations because he'd take a step out and whip a pass across the court with his left hand, and all of a sudden you're 3-on-2 on the opposite side, and it was pretty impressive. So yeah, there's some green shoots for Kansas from this game, even though it was a game that they were expected to win and that they should win, just based on the levels of both teams. And you're right about Notre Dame. I mean, Marcus Burton was awesome last year and they finished where they finished, in the ACC and didn't get anywhere close to the NCAA tournament. It's about the other guys around him, and Harrelson helps. But they just need a little bit more consistency and maybe a little bit of extra playmaking that I'm not sure that they have.
I wish they had one other playmaking guard. It feels like a lot of a load on Burton, right?
Yeah, the other guards are essentially catch and shoot guys, even Shrewsbury. So maybe Harrelson gets there because he has a bit of that to his game as well, and can play outside in and move the ball a bit. But we'll see how it goes for Notre Dame. That's a team that I kind of liked the look of coming into the preseason, and again thought they were solid at Ohio State. So we'll see.
And I like Shrewsbury. I think we all like Shrewsbury. We all think he's a good coach.
Yeah, I don't think there's anyone in college basketball who thinks that he's not up to the job or whatever. You know what I mean? It hasn't gotten there quite yet, but this is probably his most talented team he's had. So we'll see how it plays out. We had St. John's, Iowa State earlier on Monday too. Again, I thought Iowa State brought the fans brought a little bit of juice to the arena, and it was a great game up and down. St. John's, Iowa State causing havoc for each other in equal measure. What did you make of it?
Momcilovic, this was the game. I mean, he was great in this game for Iowa State. Lipsy got a weird injury, like a groin injury late in that game. That was a little bit concerning. But Momcilovic wins the game on like basically a drive where he takes on, it was a full-on collision, and he was just able to hang in the air and basically just throw it in. It was like a little runner to win the game, essentially. Obviously, they get 2 free throws late to seal it as well. But, I mean, that was the game-winning play. He's been always kind of tabbed as a one-dimensional scorer, right? He's a shooter, a catch-and-shoot guy. But I felt like you saw him grow a little bit in this game, a little bit against the physicality of St. John's. Iowa State's a really tough team. I do think the atmosphere with their fans being in the building really helped them, because St. John's, when, they were reeling a little bit, they get the lead. Sellers hit 2 huge threes late in this game, and they get back up 1. Felt like, okay, St. John's has been able to kind of keep them at bay. They're going to come away with a win here. And then all of a sudden, that kind of second win for Iowa State, and it came from the fans. So you got to give them some credit. They're able to swing the game a little bit. Lipsy was good in this game, as he traditionally is, 16-5, which is always a nice situation for them. I'm interested to see what happens with his injury, if that's something that lingers. Because if it does, obviously with this type of format, that's not a good deal, because they're going to play, very soon. So, I mean, that's something that could hurt you over the next couple games, potentially. But again, really big win. Momcilovic was the real big story for me in this game. And to see him close that game with a nice drive and a very physical finish is a very encouraging sign. And, going into this game, I had some NBA people. I was asking, who are you watching in this game? Because I'm kind of fascinated by St. John's. I'm like, is it Dylan Mitchell that you're watching? Is it Ian Jackson that you're watching? You know what I mean? Like, is it Zuby Ejiofor? It's not necessarily like an NBA-friendly group. But I got a lot of Momcilovic responses, in this game, and he really lived up to the billing. So I thought he was the player of the game. I think he ended up being actually the player of the game that they gave out. And Heisey had some big moments late in that game as well. So an encouraging, fun game of college basketball. And I think Rick Pitino was pretty sour afterwards, talking to the press.
That doesn't sound right.
Yeah, but Otzelberger had a really good game, and they were able to sustain and figure out a way to win this one. Josh Jefferson as well, another guy we wanted to give some credit here. So 17-8 for him. But again, I felt like this was just a really, really close, physical game that the fans of Iowa State were able to kind of swing them in the right direction. So you got to give them some credit for showing out in Vegas.
Yeah, I think it makes sense what you said about the NBA people taking note of Momcilovic at this point, because he's always been a skilled offensive guy, but building out physically a little bit more, adding a little bit more downhill stuff to his game is huge for them. And look, I mean, he's on. It's early in the year, and this stuff will dip because in part because they played a pretty weak schedule so far. Although they did play Mississippi State and beat them soundly, which is traditionally a pretty darn tough defensive team under Chris Jans. But, Momcilovic is currently on a 139.5 offensive rating while taking 27% of his team's shots. Mm-hmm. That's like star level stuff. And he's 46% from three. Again, these numbers will stabilize a little bit eventually, but that's the kind of thing that you can project for a guy who's 6'9" into being effective at the next level. So, and his sort of breakout is key for this Iowa State team, because they did lose some offense from last year, and they're having to get by a little bit. And yeah, we'll see where Lipsey's injury ends up. I think TJ addressed it after the game and said, we're still evaluating. We have to get him back to the hotel. Right now, it's a day-to-day situation. I don't know if it's something with his hamstring or lower leg, but we'll get it evaluated.
It looked like a groin injury live. Yeah. Not to speculate, I'm not a doctor, but that was his reaction in real time.
We could turn into one of those Twitter accounts that's like, I'm an athletics trainer / doctor, and this looks like a grade 4 hamstring recovery time, blah blah blah, like
2 to 4 weeks. Yeah,
exactly. I diagnosed it based on this image I saw on the internet. Always highly credible stuff, but no, yeah. Well, obviously that would be a blow if he's out for any amount of time, and hopefully that's not the case, because Iowa State, as my Basket Review colleague Brian Ralph called all the way back in the summer, they're any expectation that they would take a step back this year is pretty quickly being negated. They are looking as good as they ever have under Otzelberger. So
are you happy about St. John's? I know that you were kind of skeptical going into the season. Not that you're happy, but I mean, there was some skepticism, and I think it was rightful skepticism. And if you watch this game, they've kind of, Darling is slowly taking Ian Jackson's spot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
I think
they
that
have
was
a weird
in
rotation.
the cards.
Yeah.
That felt like the kind of thing even in the preseason of like, obviously we've talked this to death, but Pitino coming out and saying Jackson's the point guard, that's why we recruited him, and then within a month or so saying point guards don't even exist, so what's the point of even talking about point guards anymore? Jalen Brunson's actually a combo scoring guard, stuff like that. Like that felt like not that this was even intended, but you can envision a scenario in which Dylan Darling, who is actually a college point guard, eventually becoming the guy who has the ball in his hands a bit more. And
it's like Darling and Sellers are like the point guards, and then Ian Jackson is kind of like him and Sandin are the shooting guards. That's kind of how it's filtered out.
And there will be games where it probably makes sense for Jackson to be on the floor more. But playing against Iowa State's press and playing against Taman Lipsey is not one of those times. Lipsey is going to, if you have Jackson bringing the ball up the floor, and St. John's doesn't have one guy bring the ball up the floor, right? They are trying
Sometimes
to do a little bit
Mitchell.
more.
I mean, you see Zuby do it every once in a while. It's kind of rip and run.
For sure. But you can imagine Lipsey and Ian Jackson and that being a turnover creation engine for Iowa State. So you can understand why Darling played 24 minutes and Jackson played 16.
And then Darling had the worst foul out I've ever seen. He came on the court for like 3 seconds with 4 fouls and immediately got his 5th foul.
Yeah, not great. Yeah. Look, I mean, am I worried about St. John's? No, not really. Like, their 2 losses have been to really, really good teams in close games, and they're generating offense. I think my biggest concern about them was on the offensive end. They put up a 1.2 points per trip against an Iowa State defense that I think is going to be really, really good again this year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I'm super concerned about them, or that I think they're like headed towards the kind of, bumpy moment just yet that I envision for them. I just think it'll come at some point. And maybe this is part of it, depending on how they play the rest of the week here. But if they'd gotten beat by 10 or 15 points in either of these games, I'd be thinking that a little bit more. If their offense looked like they couldn't generate points in the way that they have, I'd be a little bit more concerned, because I think Pitino, whatever flaws they may have right now defensively, or personnel flaws that he's seeing, and they could maybe do a little bit better in terms of just straight up perimeter defense in certain situations. I think he'll get them there on that end of the floor. Like that. I don't think it was just personnel that they were as good as they were defensively last year, although that had a lot to do with it. So if this St. John's team can score points the way they're scoring right now, I think they'll ultimately be fine, even if there are some bumps along the way.
And sacrifice the fact that it does feel like, even in this game, Zuby takes the last 3, and it felt like it was a predetermined decision. I don't know how you read into it, but it felt like he was like, okay, it's the last possession. I'm the best player on the team. I'm taking this shot. I do feel like that's the maturation of this group in general. It's like, let's get the best shot, not who's supposed to get the shot. It does feel like the hierarchies in play a little bit, where it's like Zuby. If it's not Zuby, it's Bryce. If it's not Bryce, it's Sellers. If it's not Sellers, it's Sandin. If it's not Sandin, then it's Ian Jack. You know what I mean? It feels like that type of vibe for this team on the last possession. So I feel like that's really the growth I want to see from this group.
Yeah, they don't look fluid on the offensive end. They're generating points through like sheer force of talent and will.
Mm-hmm.
They're not like playing like flowing.
It's not a beautiful
stuff.
brand.
No. But they're getting up and down the floor and getting to the front of the rim, and they have the talent to score on really good defensive teams. So I'm not panic button on St. John's just yet. I don't think we've hit the nadir just yet. Or if this is the nadir, then they're in really good shape, because
they could be the Houston of this year, Lose some early games.
Iowa State's good. Alabama's good. Alabama's going to make shots over the top of you. You just kind of, I don't think you can draw too much from it. And we'll see how they play against Baylor tomorrow, which is again, had a nice win. We can talk about them really quickly. And the Creighton game, I want to shout out Josh Dix, another of the former Iowa players who spread out to the hinterlands after Fran McCaffrey left and Ben McCollum came in. We talked about Peyton Sanford. Josh Dix is a baller too, and he did his best to keep Creighton in the game down the stretch. But this Baylor team is one that I have avoided having any thoughts about, because I just want to see them for 2 months, because they're so new, and we've never really seen a Scott Drew team with this many totally new guys on the roster. It's a very peak NIL moment for Drew and the guys that he lost off of last year's roster, obviously. So I've been waiting to render any kind of verdict, but it's looking pretty good so far. They're again, not there yet in that I want to say yes, this is a top 20 team. This is a top 15 team, but man, Cameron Carr looks really good.
Yeah. This was the Cameron Carr game, 21-9, and just felt like he made every big play they needed down the stretch. And then Tunde Yesufu, another McDonald's All-American. I'm a big fan of Tunde Yesufu. I call him the Ben and Anthony Edwards. He looks a lot like Anthony Edwards, walks around like him. They have similar mannerisms. I asked him at the McDonald's All-American game, I'm like, who's your favorite player? He's like, Anthony Edwards. I was like, okay, that checks out. You're looking the part. So, I mean, he had some big plays down the stretch here. And again, like you said, it's just a totally different team, totally different group. Hard to get a real read on who they are, but they do have a lot of talent as expected. And, Scott Drew always kind of plays coy. Mr. Pickleball, he's always not really going to give you a read other than a scripture that he's going to kind of, give back to you when you ask him how it went during the game, and that's really what Scott Drew is up to. But I think they got a lot more talent than maybe we expected them to have. And I think Carr, him at Tennessee, feels like he might have been hiding in plain sight, And obviously that was a great scoop to get him to come there after 2 years at Tennessee and give him kind of the keys to the car a little bit with this team. No pun intended there with Cameron Carr, but I think by far his best game we've ever seen, and he's going to be on the radar for a lot of people. But I do think Yesufu is going to end up being a really big player for this team, especially being able to pick up guys full court. Defensively, he's only going to get better. So you got two really talented guards in that backcourt, and I feel like the front court has some talent as well. So I'm encouraged by Baylor. I don't want to get too high on them, but this was a really good game. And Creighton had a lot of fight in this game as well. Two freshmen going back at it. So, again, Baylor is definitely an unknown, but I do think they're a really good team.
Yeah, I would like to ask Scott or Baylor's staff, and if they're listening to this, and they may be, you never know, they can just, let us know. But how much credit they want to take for like the deep scout on Cameron Carr, or if they got him on campus this summer and we're just like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah,
like
great.
This guy's actually awesome. Because, he played never at Tennessee. His first year, 4% minutes. Last year, 2.8% minutes. He just never got off the bench there. He was barely used. And actually, interestingly, looking at these numbers, I see that he was listed at 6'5" his freshman year at Tennessee, and then 6'6" last year, and now is at Baylor listed at 6'5". So there's some shenanigans going on with the heights. But no, that is one of the transfers of the offseason. If this continues the way it did in their win over Creighton, this is one of the great transfer pulls of the entire season. So we'll see how it plays out. But
are you shocked that Zugic doesn't play as much for Creighton? Remember how big of a deal it was when Fedor Zugic committed to Creighton? Everyone's like, this guy's a pro. He's going to change this team. I think he played, let me look. He played 8 minutes in this game, had 3 points.
That is a little surprising. Where is he at this? Yeah, he hasn't played a ton this year at all.
Isaac
really.
Trout had some good minutes. That's a name that Virginia fans will know.
Yes. Yeah. Trout was solid. Trout's body, physically is way bigger than he used to be. It's a little bit like Blake Buchanan, for speaking of another former Virginia guy who looked a little bit like Bambi his first year at Virginia, even though he had some promising stuff to him. And then last year got a little bit more robust. And now you see him for Iowa State playing against St. John's. You're like, oh, this dude has been in the weight room for like 3 years now and looks like a real upperclassman. Trout's got a little bit of that going on too. I don't know, man. I think Creighton's just
Nick Andrew getting hurt's not good for them,
No, it's not. And I think they're kind of looking for how do we sustain what we always do offensively without the level of shooting that we've typically had. And Zugic probably doesn't quite fit into that paradigm, even if maybe he gives you a little bit more on the defensive end with his
Hudson
size,
Greer was the real one today. He was the biggest bright spot. Jason Green's a nice piece. I like Jason Green. I think he's always been a good player. But yeah, Hudson Greer was the one that really stood out today for that team. But you're right. They're kind of searching for who their identity is as a team right now.
Yeah. And if you're comparing if you're comparing like Josh Dix based on how he played, particularly in the second half against Baylor with like Zugic, then I can kind of see why you're keeping Dix in the game, because he does more stuff offensively. He's not explosive, but he can make shots. He can handle the ball. He can get to the middle of the floor and spray it and stuff. And maybe that's not what the staff is seeing from Zugic on the wing. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes for Creighton. They're, obviously I think this was kind of expected. They're in a big transition from the Kalkbrenner era, and you're seeing it on the defensive end in a big way in the, the lack of blocks and the lack of rim influence on the defensive end. They had a cheat code for 4 years.
Yeah, funnel him into Kalkbrenner and let him block it.
And you can stretch your defense out to the wing and let guys get beat one-on-one, and Kalkbrenner will make it hard for them if they don't settle in the mid-range, and they don't have anything like that this year. So it's going to be an uphill battle for Creighton on that end of the floor, and the key probably is just trying to lean into guys who can spread it and fill it up a little bit on the offense, the way classic McDermott teams do. All right, I think that's kind of where we had a close USC Boise game, which was kind of interesting.
Another former Virginia guy, Jacob Kofi.
Yes, indeed. A kind of a weird game from USC, given, I don't know.
They tried to lose it like 5 different times.
Yeah. They really did. They really did. And Boise State took one of the losses of the season this year. It doesn't really count because it's not a Division I game, but they lost their opener at home to Hawaii Pacific 79-78. So, beat Wichita State 62-59 at home, beat Montana State 62-58 at home. And so then they show up at Maui and they nearly knock off a USC team that, most metrics have like in the top 20, top 30. But that has had some struggles itself. Beat Troy in triple overtime.
And needed Chad Baker-Mazara's best game ever. Yeah.
Yes. And if that's what you need to get by Troy in your own building, in 55 minutes, that's maybe not the greatest sign, but I still think USC is talented enough to have a really good season or at least a solid season. And I like Rodney Rice a ton, obviously. Him, Kofi, and particularly obviously Baker-Mazara, the aged, wise Chad Baker-Mazara. That's a good core. So it was a little weird to see them barely get by Boise, but they did in the end, and they move on to play Seton Hall, which is another team we should talk about actually, because I think most people's reaction to that game was, wow, what a bad performance from NC State. They look a little lost. What about Will Wade? All that stuff. At least in my chat on my newsletter on Substack, there was a little bit of that going around, and I just kind of thought Seton Hall looked awesome. Like, I thought Seton Hall looked really good. Not to say that NC State was great in the game or anything like that, but if I'm Seton Hall and I'm the Big East and I'm seeing that performance and just the visuals of it, the way they look like a talented team, that they have the sort of defensive core and solidity that Shaheen's teams basically always have, even last year when they were really bad, with a bit more offensive punch this year.
Yeah, AJ State McCray was the story of the game. He was great for them. And honestly, points in the paint, 40 points in the paint. Just look this up to confirm what my eyes saw. I mean, if you look at NC State's roster and the size that they have, you would think that they would give more, the ability to be able to get these guys out of the paint. But they were incredible, put a lot of pressure. It was kind of like Shaheen Holloway's team doing what NC State's supposed to do with teams. You know what I mean? Like ball pressure, turning them over, pressing a little bit, getting up in their grill, all that sort of stuff. And it's like they just did the better version of what NC State is trying to do for these teams. And it was also a very strange Darian Williams game. It was like it was a milk carton game for Darian Williams, where it's like, okay, can the best player on this team finally show up and do something for NC State? He got benched early by Will Wade, and Will Wade was kind of like trying to send a message to him a little bit. And honestly, the second string guys came in for State and played a little bit better. Vin Allen Lubin had a really good game for State, 16-9. He's probably one of the few bright spots for them outside of Matt Abel, who I think that they have an issue as a team right now, because there's no world in which Matt Abel should not be starting for this team. But they have, obviously, you don't know the details of what's getting paid out and the promises that have been made, but Paul McNeil, Trey Holloman, Darian Williams, right? Like all these guys are brought in for a reason. Quadir Copeland, who comes from McNeese State, like he's their emotional leader. He's kind of like their Draymond of this team, right? He's just
that's
kind of
Wade's
there to be
guy
nasty.
too.
Yeah, and it's Wade's guy. But it's like they have to play the best players. And I do think that, like, even within the team, you saw the dynamic when Williams was not showing up. It was like, okay, well, Abel's getting the shots. Abel's keeping them in this game. So it's like your most talented player is playing 25 minutes. I think that's got to bump up to like at least 30-plus minutes for them to figure out the best version of themselves. So it feels like an identity crisis for this team. It felt like they thought they could sleepwalk through this game, to be quite honest. And obviously it's an early game in Maui. You got the time change. I'll give them all the excuses in the book. You can use, like I said, the Dan Hurley excuse. Maybe they can say they had some tryptophan from the turkey if they ate earlier in the week. I don't know. They can find any excuse that they want to find. But it was very strange to me how kind of disengaged Darian Williams was from the jump. Like, watching that game, I was like, what is going on here? It was very strange.
It was odd, yeah. It definitely had the 9:30 a.m. local start time feel to it, in the way that those, you get with NCAA tournament games that start at like 12:30. Teams kind of, it's cliche, but it does kind of feel like they sleepwalk into them sometimes, and then they wake up like with 8 minutes left and they're down by 12 to Yale or whatever, and you're like, oh my God, like the sky is falling. What are we gonna do?
And they were down early. They were down like 16-7. They fought back.
Yeah.
They make it reasonable at halftime, and then the second half starts. The funny thing about Maui too is like you can hear both locker rooms. like, both sides can hear each other. So I wouldn't be shocked if like Shaheen's sitting in there listening to Will Wade motherfuck his team, and he's just like, this is amazing. What a great day in Maui.
Yeah, we're having a blast. We don't need to say anything at halftime. Just listen to that.
Yeah, just listen to those guys.
I'm sure there was plenty of that going on in the NC State locker room. And yeah, you're right. It's weird with Williams because has there been 2-3 players better than him in college basketball all season thus far? Just on a pure individual level. I mean, he has been he's been every bit as good as advertised for NC State up until this point.
Scored his career high against UNCG, had 32. I mean, he's kind of done everything you expect him to do. This was the first time it was like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, coming off a 28-point game against VCU on 9 of 13 shooting and 7 rebounds and 2 assists. I mean, he's been spectacular. So you're right. It was weird. Maybe it's just a one-off deal. It does feel a little bit like that. I would be surprised if there are too many more games where Darian Williams, whether or not he makes every shot or shoots a high percentage, isn't at least running things with the ball in his hands more often than he was today. But hey, we're again circling back to our Big East topic of last week. Huge win for Seton Hall. They're 6-0. Huge win for the Big East, in a non-conference. Because I don't think, again, it's a little bit like talking about Kansas earlier. Whatever flaws you have or whatever issues you have with the performance with NC State, it would be a shock if that team wasn't, at least like a 5 or 6 seed come March, right? So it's a win that's going to hold up for Seton Hall and the conference, and it's a win that I think will elevate Seton Hall's numbers. Net numbers and current KenPom and et al. Numbers significantly. I think they're already up to 74th, and they started the season at outside the top 100 or close to it. So they're already kind of creeping their way up into like, hey, maybe this is a tournament team kind of level, which is a big deal considering where they were last season and where they have been for a lot of Shaheen's tenure. Well, particularly last season. I guess they were solid enough his first 2 years. Obviously didn't make the tournament, but you get the picture. So yeah, really interesting to see what they do against USC, and interesting to see how NC State bounces back, because again, Boise, despite their opening night loss to Hawaii Pacific, looked viable, as they often do on Monday. So that'll be an interesting second round.
Yeah, they can't overlook that game. And they can't have what happened to UConn happen to them, where they just get drugged. You know what I mean? They just get down on themselves and lose all those games in Maui, because that's going to be meaningful, especially when they were the favorite to win the Maui Invitational. That's the other big part of this. Like, NC State was supposed to win this tournament. They were the highest rated team. Now Texas is the favorite. But I feel like this kind of broke where like maybe Shaheen and Seton Hall could have like, a Cinderella run to a Maui championship. How fun would that be? So it was a great game.
That could be big, and no, yeah, you're right though. That is a big challenge that I think obviously UConn did not surmount last season, and Hurley's talked about it since, about how he felt like he did a bad job during the tournament.
He did do a bad job.
Yeah, I mean,
it was obvious. We all watched.
Yeah,
it was bad.
Of just like, okay, you lost one game. Like, go win 2 more. These games still matter. The tournament aspect is a big part of the Maui Invitational, but there are, particularly last year, there are good teams in the bracket still left for you to beat in games that will, mean something come later in the year. So you can't act like it's an AAU tournament single elimination type of deal. We're like, oh, we're in the losers bracket now. Okay, let's just finish these games up and go home. Yeah,
you can't sulk. You got to play.
Yeah,
you
got to go. All right. Well, let's look ahead real quick to what we're seeing the rest of the week here, because there's a ton of basketball. There's a ton of events. Some of it quite interesting to me. The Acrisure Classic, which is, not to be confused with the Acrisure Holiday Classic.
Right. 2 different things.
2 different things. I'm not sure what Acrisure is. I looked this up today. It's like a insurance data analytics company or something like that, but shout out to Acrisure. Thank you for sponsoring 2.
Obviously
MTEs,
making a lot of money to have
happen.
2 legitimate events, right? Yeah.
I believe they were set up to acquire like other insurance companies, and now they're their own. It's something like that anyway. wherever the money comes from. I don't really need to know, as long as you're sponsoring events where I get to watch college basketball. That's one thing we learned on this episode of the shows. We don't care where the money comes from. No, just kidding. But the Acrisure Classic has Iowa Ole Miss, which I think is like one of the more low key fun games of this week, with Bennett Sturts against the French Tyrese Halliburton, as we dubbed him on last week's show.
Yeah, it's a good one. It is fascinating, kind of just forecasting some of the games and some of the matchups. Even on, that game's going to be a good one. I'm excited to see. Sturts has been great. There's always kind of the weird tinge of like you're just following your, for Tucker DeVries, obviously it's his dad, so it's a little bit different. But when you follow the coach to the new place, does it translate? St. Louis, we obviously have that situation as well, where we've seen low major guy or mid major guy go up to high major, follow their coach. But Sturts has been everything that he's supposed to be. McCollum feels like his identity has traveled well. It feels like Iowa, I have some Iowa fans in my life. They seem very excited about kind of the juice around the program and the team itself. So, Sturts is going to be in the mix. He's going to be talked about quite a bit, but it feels like he hasn't had his stage yet to kind of introduce himself to the larger public. And I feel like during Feast Week, it's a good opportunity for him and for Iowa, especially because McCollum is one of those guys where, everybody wanted him last year. So this is a good moment for him to kind of send that message that like, hey, we made the right decision. Fran's happy at Penn. I got a new day here at Iowa. It's not the same old, run around. It's a new day here for the Hawkeyes.
Yeah. And look, I like this Ole Miss team, man. I like Iowa so far. They've looked great. McCollum's put his system in. Obviously, it helps bringing Sturts and all those guys over from Drake. So it's been kind of a plug and play type of deal there. And they've looked excellent, although they haven't played anyone nearly as good as Ole Miss. Their big non-conference game today was Xavier, and Xavier's in, a big time rebuild, it looks like. So this is a big test for them. And Ilias Kamerdine is good. Kind of out of nowhere. He's one of these international guys that when you're previewing, particularly if you're me, but I think even a lot of people who maybe watch, or try to track these guys a little bit more closely, it's kind of like, yeah, we'll see when he gets on campus. Maybe he's good. Maybe he's not, quite up to the level of college basketball. He is excellent. A really fun 6'5" point guard who literally shoots the ball like Tyrese Halliburton. So it's a fun wrinkle. Malik Diaz been good. AJ Storr.
Yep.
That was the guy in the offseason. I remember writing in my SEC preview, like Chris Beard has always in his coaching career, particularly early in his career when he was coaching in the Arkansas or South Carolina CBA team, whatever it was, and he at Little Rock, he always has had this ability to get good stuff out of guys who feel like they're kind of at the end of the line in their careers. And I think AJ Storr is a perfect example of that, of like, okay, you were hot at Wisconsin 2 years ago and you got your big transfer move to Kansas and then it completely went sideways. And like, you're a senior now, man. Like, are you gonna actualize your potential? Are you going to become like the NBA player you clearly think that you should be? And I just feel like there was a good dynamic there, seeing Beard in his past coaching places, that could work. And I think he's gotten it out of him so far. Storr's numbers, you look at him last year at Kansas, which were just a disaster. His efficiency numbers are way, 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 way up. His turnover numbers way down, shooting the ball well from the perimeter. I think Ole Miss has a chance to be really, really good, not just because of Kamerdine, and obviously they already had Malik Diaz, but I think AJ Storr is gonna probably hit his like 90th percentile outcome this year. And if he does, that's a really good college basketball player.
2 elite coaches too. I mean, I feel like Chris Beard, because of the whole situation with Texas and, that's been litigated over and over again, it just feels like he is a very special talent as far as being a head coach in college basketball. And even I do this sometimes. Even when you were asking about the matchup, like I immediately went to McCollum and Sturts and Iowa. That's just where my brain went. But it's like the reality of Chris Beard being the head coach at Ole Miss and having a talented team, that's a dangerous proposition. You know what I mean? Like they definitely can do something with Beard behind him. So that's a good point. It's a good matchup.
Look, it's no secret what happened with Beard at Texas, and there are a lot of schools that would not have hired him, and understandably so. And Ole Miss, did not have that issue. Mm-hmm. And you can say whatever you want about that, but at some point along the line, the conversation was pretty clearly, do we want to win college basketball games or not? And they said yes. And whatever else you may get with him, or with the past, or answering for it, if Chris Beard tries to get another job at a different school, it will become a conversation again, and would have been if he had decided to leave Ole Miss this past offseason when he was sort of rumored and there were Indiana fans talking about it. And every time a big job comes open, it's going to be a topic of conversation. But the calculus with him was pretty simple. It wasn't, oh, maybe we'll win games. It's yes, you will win.
You will win, games, but at what cost? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
exactly. It's the moral quandary. Yeah.
For sure. But it wasn't oh yeah, this guy's pretty good. Maybe he can get us going again here in Oxford. It's like, no, if we do this, we will win. Mm-hmm. And so that's what it is right now. So yeah, I'm really interested to see that Iowa Ole Miss game. I'm interested to see the Rady Children's Invitational. No idea if I'm pronouncing that correct. I've still seen graphics out there floating around with Kansas's logo on it, but Kansas pulled out of that event in the summer. Mm-hmm. That's actually TCU now. So if you're seeing a Children's Invitational,
that's in San Diego, right?
Yes, yeah, it's a San Diego event. I assume that's like a children's hospital or something. I have no idea. But,
I think it is in San Diego. Yeah,
it sounds like it probably is, unless it's like a children's museum. But no, it's almost certainly a children's hospital. But just so you know, Kansas is not in that event. They're in Las Vegas at the Players Era. They got pulled away,
which is kind of a sign of the times. That's the other 100%. One. Just flipping back, we can talk about the Rady Children's Invitational, but Arkansas is committed.
We don't have to.
Well, Arkansas is committed to the 2027 Maui Invitational, but they're not fully confirmed. So if Calipari pulls out and then goes to the Players Era instead of the Maui Invitational, I feel like that will be our tipping point to know kind of where the scale is. You know what I mean? Like if John Calipari is passing up Maui to go to Vegas and play with the Players Era Festival, that'll kind of tell us where we are right now.
There's one other team that's similarly committed, but have said that they're going to honor them. Arizona. Mm-hmm. Arizona has the same thing where I think they've been in talks about and because they're in the Big 12, obviously it's kind of de rigueur. But they've essentially said like, no, we're going to play at Maui. Like we committed to that tournament. I'm not going back on that. So that's cool.
We need more of that.
Yeah, we need a little bit more of that. But the Children's Invitational is actually kind of interesting. Florida, Wisconsin, Providence, TCU. TCU, not the greatest start in the season. I think Jamie Dixon will get them to, mid Big 12 competitive level. Eventually, it may be too late to be an at-large tournament team, but they'll be spicy eventually. Florida, we've discussed at length, and our issues with their backcourt. Wisconsin's an interesting team. The BYU game, we didn't really touch on it this past weekend. Not a great showing. Not their best outing. Kind of got blown off the floor. And then Providence, survived. Who did they play over the weekend? Just an okay team, but they ended up surviving. Let me look. It's just so this doesn't annoy listeners. Penn State, that's right. They ended up beating Penn State by 12. Competitive game, was close throughout much of it, and I was sort of sitting there watching, be like, if Providence loses this game, it's full on crisis mode for Kim. But they got through it, and so they get to go and play a game against Wisconsin on a neutral court, and that could potentially be a really big sort of season-changing win. I think they have the talent to do it. So it's kind of a low-key interesting event later this week.
Yeah, I like Edwards, I like Vox, and I like Sellers. I like the guards that Providence has. I feel like they've all been really encouraging. They were good in that game. Vox has been a surprise. I didn't really have him on my radar, so he's been a nice, encouraging sign. And then obviously Edwards, you knew from Vanderbilt. We knew he was a good player. Thought he would make some noise in the Big East. So far, so good in general for that team. And, Providence fans, they're active. They're listening. So we wanted to give them some love just in case. We don't want them coming at our necks. So
my other speaking of the Big East and teams, Georgetown has an interesting 4-team event. They're in the ESPN Events Invitational Magic Bracket. Now, this is interesting. Is this new this year? Did I miss this last year? Where the ESPN Invitational events have essentially one unified event name with 3 different brackets that are like Magic. I don't know. I can't remember what the other ones are, but they're like
it's like Magic, Imagination, Adventure, and Imagination. I think are the 3.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
It's like the 3 phases of the event. Yeah, and it's like different levels of teams are in each one. So the Magic is like the best bracket. It's like the premier bracket. Those 4 teams. Yeah.
I wonder. It would be fun to sit in that meeting or series of meetings that they had, and they were like, well, imagination is obviously really important, but is it as good as magic?
Yeah.
And they're like, magic, we have to go with magic.
It's the John Wooden triangle right now. It's a pyramid.
Yeah,
they just did it at the top. They're like, magic's at the point of the pyramid. Obviously, we're all about magic. One layer down, it's imagination. And then, of course, we need a little adventure. We'll put adventure at the bottom. Those are our 3-prong attacks at the event. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually the Walt Disney triangle. It's in his old office somewhere. It's like a sacred scroll that
Mickey Mouse teaches you how to tie your shoes, and then he shows you the pyramid.
Exactly right. But anyway, Georgetown plays Dayton and then one of BYU Miami. That's kind of interesting for a Georgetown team that started the season pretty well and potentially getting a game against BYU if they can handle Dayton. I guess quote unquote seeds hold from how we sort of view these teams going in. That would be interesting.
It feels like a lot of trap games for BYU, doesn't it? Like I feel like all those matchups are tough for BYU. Like you don't really want to play any of those teams.
I think Miami's good, certainly talented. Like we'll see if they can put it together into a cohesive whole. We talked about them last week. I liked what I saw from them against Florida in spurts anyway. So we'll see. And then Dayton is solid enough too. I mean, Dayton could easily beat Georgetown. So yeah, there's a lot there in the Magic bracket. We'll see if it lives up to the billing. One that will not live up to, well, I don't know if it has any billing. The Emerald Coast Classic. I just wanted to shout this out because there's a lot of these MTEs that have a lot of mid majors in them, and a lot of fans probably won't pay them a ton of mind. For example, the Jacksonville Classic, which on Monday, I don't know if you saw this, was being broadcast. You had to pay a fee.
What was it, like the Flow College? What was It
was being broadcast on something called Pass the Ball Live, which I think is just a home cook. I've never heard of it before. Maybe it exists. I don't want to impugn anybody, but it seems like it was just a cooked up stream.
It's owned by a Kreischer.
Yeah, exactly. and according to things I was seeing on my timeline anyway, it was not the most reliable in terms of actually broadcasting the entire game. I don't know which game this was at the time, but I saw multiple complaints of people. My Twitter feed is algorithmically specified to just show me fans complaining about college basketball.
Same.
So I see it all. I see all that good stuff. So Pass the Ball Live did not go on, but that's one of those tournaments you can, if you're there for a reason. You're not necessarily throwing that on. You might be tempted to see, the Emerald Coast Classic because you see some high major teams in there, but it's the field is DePaul, LSU, Georgia Tech, and Drake. Now let's leave Drake out of this. That's a mid-major program in the in the Valley that's transitioning from a really good coach that followed a really good coach, and they're still figuring it out on the fly here. Eric Henderson has got a lot of work on his hands. I just want to say, if you're in an MTE with DePaul, LSU, and Georgia Tech, I don't know that you're feeling particularly good about the state of your program, your season, what you're going to get done in the non-conference. It's not looking great because maybe LSU, we'll see how it goes. Maybe LSU blows out everybody they play, but that's not. That's the kind of, I was scrolling down through all the MTEs today looking at it and being like, oh, here's a high major one, DePaul. Oh, this is where they shunted everybody off to the side.
Yeah, this is the players era is not calling these guys. I also feel like LSU is angling for Will Wade's return. That's my big that's my forecast the future kind of idea.
Your Brian Windhorst, like fingers in the air moment.
His AD from McNeese State coming over, working with LSU. He's obviously left on bad terms with LSU, obviously knows the area well. If things go not so great with NC State year one, those fans start coming at his neck. LSU calls and says, hey, we got Lane Kiffin and we got a job for you if you want it. I don't know. Just throwing it out there.
Man.
Watch out for that.
That would be incredible.
That'd be great.
Hopefully
he
doesn't. Hopefully he doesn't get the level of contract that it draws the governor's attention the way Brian Kelly's buyout did, because that's not where you want to be as a state or as an athletics program when your governor's holding press conferences being like, what the hell? How the hell I got to pay this guy $100
Incredible
million?
Accent, though. Like him just running through things. I was like, what is happening? Like this feels like something that would be like in a Disneyland skit or something. This can't be real.
You got to love the college football coaches' salaries, and to some extent, college basketball coaches' salaries have gotten to the point where they're now like a line item on the state budget that a governor notices and is like, "Wait, hold up! I could build like a railroad for this or something. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, he's like, we're paying this guy $10 million. He's the highest paid employee in the state.
Just to not coach,
right?
Just to leave. Yeah, it's not great. We may need to see some tapering and some moderation from various clients of various coaching agents, but I don't know that that's going to happen anytime soon. They're going to continue to feast the same way. Look at that transition. The same way that we are going to continue to feast on college basketball all week. I think we've run the gamut here. Tate, you got any plans for the holiday? What are you doing?
I'm going to Seattle with my girlfriend's family, so I'll be up there for these games. Thanksgiving, we got some great games on Thanksgiving. North Carolina, Michigan State, and Fort Myers, Arkansas, Duke, which will be a good one. And then on Friday, hopefully the tryptophan doesn't hit in for UConn. I know that Hurley said they're going to eat on Wednesday instead of Thursday, but we get Illinois, UConn, which is going to be a great game on Friday. So I'll be up in Seattle for all those games, man. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I'll be probably with the laptop on my lap while the football dominates the TV, but you got to make sacrifices in a family setting.
It's why you have to have, I feel like for you and I, like you have to have an iPad or like be able to watch games on your phone or something, because like, NFL, you got NBA now taking over with like the cup or whatever they're doing, whatever they're trying to roll out. It's their version of the Players Era Festival. But you got to have something to stay loyal to the game, to college basketball, the best game that there is. So I like it.
No, the MacBook will be on the lap for a significant portion of Thursday for sure. When I'm not hustling kids around and making sure they don't tear each other's hair out and stuff. So it's all happening. But that's it for us. We're going to call a show there. Enjoy the basketball, everybody. Enjoy Thanksgiving. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you to our producer, Corey Aldis. Thank you to our graphics guy, Sam Freyer at Basket Review. Thank you to Trilly Donovan. Thanks to Homefield. And again, thank you, Tate. We will be back next week after the feast week festivities die down with another show, and we'll see where we stand then. It should be a fun one for everyone here. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.